Welcome to Artist Tales, the podcast that features and celebrates artists from different walks of life. I'm your host, Heather Martin, and in this episode, I'm joined with Jane Thakoordin. Jane is a Birmingham-based participatory artist of British and Guyanese heritage, whose work in textile weaves together threads of activism, mental health, and community care. Her practice is rooted in co-production, and whether she's repurposing fabric or facilitating spaces for healing, Jane centers collaboration, resilience, and radical tenderness. From the Grenfell Memorial Quilt to sewing solidarity, her banners and installations speak volumes, stitching memory, meaning, and protest. As a qualified social worker and a visiting lecturer, Janet's approach is shaped by lived experience and grounded in trauma-informed practice, social justice, and deep cultural insight. Her art holds space, challenges systems, and sparks connection. And in this episode, she shares her journey. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you very much, Heather. What a lovely introduction. It's gorgeous.
Well, you're such a wonderful person. I mean, it's the least I could say, actually.
Wow. Thank you.
So to start off, I know I've given a bit of an introduction, but tell us a bit about yourself in your own words.
Yeah, okay then. That's lovely. So thank you. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me onto your fantastic podcast. My journey, I suppose, started, a long time ago. I did a degree in visual arts a long time ago at Lancaster University. And because I come from a migrant family, my parents' heritage, my dad Guyanese, from Indian Guyanese, from Guyana, and my mum is from London, and we very much are from a kind of migrant family. I wasn't allowed to do a full art degree. I had to do something else that had an element of career prospects associated with it, attached to it. So I did a kind of combined visual arts and social policy degree, which I thought was going to be really dull and really disinteresting, and it was just purely to please my dad, to be honest. But actually, it really sparked something in me, the connection between social justice, social policy, and creativity. I didn't necessarily know it at the time when I was a 19-year-old, emerging visual artist and radical, self-proclaimed radical, thinking I was about to change the world. But it came to me really as my career kind of developed through my 20s and 30s, then obviously later into my later life and later career. So that's where I started back in, 1989 or something awful like that. And then I worked for a period of time as an arts officer in actually quite a rural area. And I managed to survive that for about 3 or 4 years. And I worked incredibly hard and I worked long hours. And the concept and the idea of time off in lieu never even crossed my mind. So looking back now, I think that I was the perfect choice for that job because I was full of energy and beans and enthusiasm and knew no difference. So I worked my socks off. And then I moved into social work. I made a kind of conscious decision nearly 35 years ago to move into social work. And that was sparked by having a very short but really intense placement in a psychiatric hospital as part of my degree, my undergraduate degree. And I was really, really moved, but really taken with the power of art therapy in such a restricted kind of context, if you like. So a lot of the people that I saw when I was on placement were in locked wards in a psychiatric hospital. And to witness their creative outlet and their means of communication and expression in a creative therapeutic space was really kind of quite revelatory to me. And that really sparked something within my social work practice initially. And then later on, as I became more able to have time and space to continue my creative practice, was I then able to bring the two things together. And I sit now, I think, in a really privileged but beautiful space, anchored equally between social work and professional social work, social justice and participatory arts. So that in a very, very quick snapshot is my artist career.
And what draws you to that participatory kind of work?
My heritage and my background and my upbringing, I think, have really formed me. I come from a really political family. my parents were, when we were younger, myself and my brother, we were brought up in a communist household, which was an unusual experience. Looking back, fantastic experience. But my mum and dad were staunch communists and had a real sense of supporting other people that, and supporting people in a practical way. They were always engaged politically, but their doors were always open for people. We had Chilean asylum seekers in our house. We had numerous people over the years that were staying with us when we were younger. We were never entirely sure why they were there, but they were there for a bit of sanctuary. So the concept of working alongside other people and sharing space, and a kind of socialist principle, I suppose, is rooted in my heritage. And so as an artist, I cannot conceive for myself of working in any other way other than with other people, featuring in all aspects of my practice.
Yeah, I can see how it, that sort of upbringing and that sort of experience really influenced you. From kind of reading a bit about you, your work is also very based, or the art is very based on kind of textiles and that sort of thing. And I have come across, I guess more recently, or become more aware of kind of more, whether it's, call it participatory, or perhaps I was thinking at the time more community, or ultimately community. It often can be that kind of fabric-based or textile-based art. Because I know recently, like I visited the Tate Modern, there was the, AIDS quilt. And, there's others, and I've mentioned the Grenfell quilt that you've worked on as well. And it just makes me think that people are using what's around them. It's very organic. It's very, you don't necessarily have to have the best of the best. You just use what's there. Is that something that, you observed, or you were drawn to, or is it just something I'm kind of assuming perhaps?
No, you make a really, really good kind of observation. I think textiles are, for me, they are so accessible, are sustainable, and are easily available for people, which I think is really crucial, and also can be manipulated in any way that an individual chooses to. So they're very much a kind of baseline material that can be the beginnings of something sculptural, two-dimensional, text-based, absolutely anything. You can do so many things with textiles. So that's one of the reasons why I think I'm drawn to that, to using textiles. Of course, the other thing is the history of quilt making and the use of textiles in history, from bio tapestry to the Chilean women making the amazing protest quilts of the disappeared of their families, the collages that they've made. Deep South American Black women making amazing quilts that are threaded with the history of slavery. All of those ways of creating and using textiles are a beautiful and multi-sensory way of embedding history. And I feel that textiles lends itself so much to that, because it's the tactile nature of making the choices of types of materials we're going to work with, the colours, the patterns. It lends itself so much to infinite amounts of choices, of which none are wrong. And I think that's the thing that really draws me. So there's nothing gives me more pleasure than maybe working with a group of people and opening up a bag or a case or a box full of different types of fabrics, embellishments, offcuts of sari material, metallic gold, lame, all sorts of stuff that I've collected, over the time. Beautiful sequined material, silks, all sorts, and just letting people get their hands in it and feel it and touch it and hold it and activate it and then work together, selecting, choosing, taking risks, experimenting, and then ultimately creating something really beautiful. That just gives me so much pleasure and makes me, that's the kind of stuff that makes my heart sing, really.
I love that kind of imagery of, everything is unique and nothing's wrong and it's very tactile, because I'm just conscious that, we're now in, what some call a digital age, where it's all digital, all online, or potentially all online. We now have AI coming in. And it's almost in some ways a bit subversive to have, people might think, oh, it's old school, but it's also lending itself to that subversiveness, because I think quite often a quilt is a quilt. The function of a quilt is to keep people warm. But as we've kind of mentioned, it's it can be used for a protest. It can be used to kind of that community, that narrative of a community, as you've mentioned, the Black women in the south of the States. And I've seen it elsewhere where different communities take these things, very tactile, and it's a form of protest or subversiveness, which you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, it's just textiles, it's clothing. Well, actually, that can be used, that can be something quite subversive or used as a protest.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes the more subtle, the more powerful as well. So one of the recent projects I've just completed is working with a group of people who are seeking asylum, who are refugees and asylum seekers from all over the world, who are gay and trans, and have come to our city to try and start a new life because they're persecuted in their home country. And we've made some amazingly beautiful capes, very beautiful glittery capes, a bit like Liberace, if anybody remembers Liberace, beautiful capes. And on the back of those capes are really strong messages, defiant messages, things like gay till I die, love as rebellion, things like this, that really, really strong statements that will hit people quite hard when they see those capes worn, maybe at Pride or another event or an activist event, for example. And that's really important to me because I think getting the messages across in a creative way, sometimes subtle, I think is really, really powerful. Banners are wonderful. Banners are a brilliant way of bringing people together, bringing community together, marching, walking, whatever, under their slogan, under something that represents them and tells the world about this is who we are, this is what we believe in, we are defiant and we're holding this space and we're taking up this space. Yeah, it gives me masses of pleasure to work with people to create banners during a process that involves people really digging deep about their own value base or digging deep about what really matters to them. So my capes, the capes, for example, are a result of a series of conversations with the group of people that I was talking about, who generally speaking, and I think people who maybe work alongside asylum seekers may resonate with this, that generally speaking don't want to rock the boat, obviously, don't want to protest because they don't seek attention. They're here to live a quieter life as possible and go through the asylum process as quietly and as straightforwardly as they want to, as they can. But also with the gentle conversations, recognizing that they absolutely have a right to say and speak up and tell people what life is really like. Sadly, educate people about what it is like to be an asylum seeker who is gay in this country, being unable to even contemplate going back to their home country, no matter how much they love it, no matter how much they miss their loved ones. It's something that they just can't do. So, that kind of way of using text and textiles and clothing is something that I've been exploring quite a lot recently.
And I think that project is very timely as well because, certainly in the UK and elsewhere, it's not just a UK kind of discussion, if you can call it that. Migration is a thing. Many countries are really struggling with migration. There's, potentially backlash, some of the politicians that we're hearing, and I'm not going to name any, but, you're hearing kind of a narrative that's quite negative towards migration, and it's not easy being a migrant. It's not easy, as you've mentioned, to leave countries, particularly for your own safety. When you're leaving for your own safety, it's, and it's scary to go somewhere completely different, particularly if you've never been there before. So I think it's really a quite timely sort of topic, with the political landscape.
Yes, absolutely. It is. Sadly, it is. And it's becoming more and more so, isn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. You've mentioned some of your projects, and I've mentioned a couple in my introduction as well. One is the Grenfell Memorial Quilt, and I'm really mindful about Grenfell because I know this year, so Grenfell happened in 2017, we're now 2025, so it's 8 years after Grenfell. And I know there's been some discussion about taking down the building because it's deemed as unsafe. So when I read that you had the memorial quilt, Grenfell Memorial Quilt, I found that quite interesting. So could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, that's just an amazing project and quite transformational for my practice as well, to be honest with you. So the Grenfell Memorial Quilt project itself has been going since late 2017, same year, obviously, as the fire. And it was instigated by an amazing person called Tuesday Greenidge, who's just inspirational. Her and her team of people based in North Kensington have been working diligently away all of these years, making, sewing, creating beautiful quilts. Now, their aspiration, and I've got no doubt that they will achieve this, and their aspiration is to make quilts or have quilts made that are as long as the tower was tall. So the aspiration is to have a quilt that's going to be 220 metres long. And it'll happen because they're just amazing at mobilising other people. So all over the world, people are making sections of the quilt. I took a section, a 12-foot square section, and the back fabrics of the quilt is a jelly roll. So a jelly roll is a series of strips of fabric all sewn together. And the fabric created by Tuesday and her team in North Kensington Library, the fabric that makes up the jelly roll is all from fabrics and clothes that weren't able to be used but were donated at the time of the fire. I remember driving down to London at the time with a carload full of clothes and food and all sorts, because I think at the time people felt so desperately wanting to offer some practical support to what was going on. So lots of people did that. They had an abundance of clothes, materials, all sorts of things, some of which they weren't able to use. So rather than just discard it, typical of Tuesday and her team, they turned them into these beautiful pieces of jelly roll fabric, 12-foot square. I took a square and I had an idea in my head, a tiny little seed of an idea in my head. And I just kind of put it out there into the social media universe, asked for people to create something, sign up to create something with me. And it happened. And the process of sending the call out into the world and waiting for things to return was the most amazingly affirming belief in the power of humanity, because people did what they said they would do, which sounds really silly and really simple, but actually it was just beautiful, because 72 people passed in the fire and 68 artists, because some people made 68 artists came back to me with beautifully created birds. And what was so powerful was I used the biographies that were printed in The Guardian about each of the 72 people and sent each of the artists who responded to my call out, sent them a named person and a little bit of the biography to them, and asked them to create a bird. These are the dimensions, material, there's no rules other than, the obvious ones. These are the dimensions, off you go, fill your boots. And the work that came back was just absolutely beautiful, so stunning. And what also was so beautiful was the words that people sent back in relation to the process of creating their bird, and also in relation to developing a sense of knowing or understanding of the person they were creating the bird for. So, and I've always known that art is transformational. I kind of know that, but to see it and feel it in all those senses was just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So the piece that we made is called Decaged Birds Dream of Flying. And that to me was a kind of metaphor in a sense of thinking about those people that perished on that horrendous date in June 2017, and the concept of just, being able to fly away. So that was the theme. And so the piece itself now, as we record this in July, is in Milan with 7 other pieces of the panel of the Memorial Quilt, and it's on display in the Triennial Milano, which is just an amazing exhibition that has a theme of inequalities. So it looks at housing, architecture, creativity, culture. So it's an amazing kind of is it exposition? Is that the right word? Where, like a big event where all sorts of things come together.
Yeah.
So what an amazing privilege to see the pieces hung up so beautifully in Milan. Yeah, so that's the kind of story of the quilt. So the transformation for me in my practice was this idea that you send things out into the world, and if it comes back, bonus. If it doesn't come back, it's okay. There's always a plan B. But the fact that everything came back, and it came back so beautifully, and some of the words, as I say, some of the words were so touching. I managed to find some time to catalogue all of the birds so that people can get a lovely close-up look of each of the individual birds made, and the name of the person, obviously, that the bird is dedicated to, and the artist who created it. And then the vast majority of people that created wrote a paragraph for me as well about the process. And people talked about, the privilege of being involved and not expecting to feel quite as emotional as they did when they started the process of sitting and thinking and creating with a person in mind and a stranger in mind as well. So that's just a lovely kind of affirming project. And I want to do more of those.
Yeah, no, it sounds really affirming and really positive. And, just reflecting on what you've been saying about Grenfell and some of the other projects, what occurs to me about this type of art is it's really kind of capturing people's history that could quite possibly and quite easily be smoothed over, not talked about, not spoken about. Because often you look at history, and I I often look at history and think, well, whose stories are not being told, Yeah. And it can be quite easy that, people in the margins, people who, are pushed to the fringes, whether they're kind of immigrants, whether they're kind of in a, the poor or, the people who are not perhaps having as much money, or whoever that group is, whether it's the LGBT community, things like this, like the banners or the quilts. It's just that kind of memory, a story of, and protest voice of, we do exist, we're here.
Absolutely, yeah. It's that classic thing, is that history is written by the winners, isn't it? That phrase.
Yeah.
Of course it is. And you kind of alluded to there going to Tate and looking at the AIDS quilts. I mean, that is like the most amazing example, isn't it, of emotion, history, unspoken, unsaid grief expressed so beautifully by people. And I suppose that element of making sure that people are included. So that's the kind of difference. I think some people who aren't necessarily familiar with the kind of term participatory arts might get slightly confused with community arts versus participatory arts. And in my mind, it might be just quite useful for me just to kind of give my version of kind of the difference. This is what I think is the difference anyway. Community arts is wonderful. But community arts is an egalitarian process where everybody contributes whatever they choose, and whatever is the result is the example of the process. And it's wonderful. And quite often it's not edited, it's not necessarily curated, but it's a chance for everybody to work together in an egalitarian way and produce something wonderful. And that's great. But from my point of view, participatory arts is more about a relationship between an artist or artists and a set of other people, many of whom might also be artists, but don't really regard themselves as artists, but a set of people who collaborate together to co-create something. Now, what I mean by that sounds a bit kind of jargony maybe, but what I mean by that is that the discussion, the planning, the kind of like risk-taking and the experimenting, trying things out together is all part of the process. The culling and the curating is part of the process as well. And maybe the aesthetic designing is part of the process. And then what may end with a product, whether that's a banner, piece of textile, a set of prints. It could be anything really. For me, a successful participatory project means that everybody that participated in that period of time can see themselves or their efforts reflected in the piece, at least everybody somewhere. That doesn't mean that every single person's work gets put on a piece. So it's not like let's chuck everything on. We've done everything, let's chuck it all on. There's an element of editing, curating, selecting, rejecting, all of those things. That's part of the process of artists and artist participants participating together to co-create something. Hope that doesn't sound like gobbledygook, but I think I know what I'm talking about there.
No, that is really helpful actually, and it's given me a bit of clarity between the two. So thank you. In researching you, I've come across that you're the founder of the Birmingham Artivistas and also a member of the Mixed Rage Collective. Could you tell me a little bit about those?
Yeah, so the Birmingham Artivistas is a collection of artists and interested creatives that came together probably about 10 years ago, I think. I kind of discovered craftivism about 15 years ago, and I realised that I was probably a craftivist long before I discovered the word craftivist actually existed. And I loved it. And we did, I initially brought some friends together, and then we opened it up for anybody, any like-minded creatives. We began to meet monthly in Birmingham and started doing all sorts of creative campaigning, raising awareness of particular issues. So some of the early work we did was we made a set. I remember it was fantastic. We made a set of anatomically correct hearts, textile hearts, to gift to the Board of Trustees for the British Heart Foundation based in Birmingham, because we found out that people that were transporting bags of blood across Birmingham were on a 0-hour contract, which horrified us because it made us think about lowest paid workers doing the most important job, carrying the most important product. So we decided to tackle that and raise awareness of thinking that was a real kind of social injustice. So rather than just kind of standing outside the offices of the British Heart Foundation and shouting and screaming, we decided to do it in a creative way. So that was one of our first projects. And over the years, we've worked on lots of wonderful things. We've done work with organisations around domestic violence, raising awareness, that kind of stuff. Now, and then we moved into, myself and a couple of other people started thinking about the notion of craft, and kind of, we got a little bit, individually and personally, we got a little bit kind of cynical about the concept of the concept of craft being the quiet revolution and the kind of quiet protest. Because we realised that we've been protesting, I'm 58 now, we've been protesting since we were kids. I was on marches with mum and dad when I was 5. Got all kinds of photographic evidence of all of us, when we were little toddlers going on marches. So we've been protesting and shouting and screaming all of our lives, really. And I wasn't prepared to be a quiet activist. I wanted to be a noisy activist. So it made me start thinking about different ways in which we could take the fantastic concepts of craftivism and morph them into a little bit more of a contemporary kind of arts perspective. So hence artivistas. So we went from craftivists to artivists to being a group of women, and with women female identifying. So we've got women who are trans, we've got women who just identify as women, whoever they are. We accept and encourage and celebrate all women. So we then became artivistas to kind of feminize the artivists, if you like. So yeah, Birmingham Artivistas still going strong, still using creativity to raise awareness of particular issues. We had a wonderful project that looked at the statistics of the number of kids that live in poverty in our city. So Birmingham is a challenging city to be in if you're a young family. And if you're a low-income young family, it's a hard place. We've got a bankrupt city council. We've got a real dearth of social housing. It's a hard place. It's a great place to live. It's a hard place to live, though. The number of kids that live in poverty in our city is around about 95,000 people. 95,000. It's a hell of a lot of people, young children. So we've this project where we embroider these statistics in a very beautiful way, but we embroider them. We send them to the councillors to remind them about what's happening in their city, just to keep them kind of minded and aware. Of course, they're aware, but it's like just giving them that nudge, letting them know that we're not taking our eyes off of the most kind of vulnerable people in the city. I suppose that's the kind of social work bit of me, really, that can't switch off, to be honest. So that's the Artivistas. And you mentioned the Mixed Rage Collective, which has just brought me so much joy and solidarity in the last few years. There's 5 members of the Mixed Rage Collective, and we're called Mixed Rage, R-A-G-E, because we're all mixed parentage, all of us. We come from different heritages. Really, some members of the collective have got such amazingly rich mixed heritages. So we're all artists in different ways. We've got a poet, we've got a printmaker, myself as a textile artist, a filmmaker, and then we all dabble in lots of other things as well. And we've been together about 5 years now. We've had several exhibitions of our work. We've published a set of zines as well. We do workshops, we conduct seminars, we do all sorts of stuff. And that is the most amazing and beautiful way of reminding myself of what it's like to be an artist, because we support each other, we encourage each other, we challenge each other when we need to. It's just a great space where we keep each other going from a creative point of view, and sometimes from a personal point of view as well. So that's one of the things that I would always actually encourage artists to think about, is forming collectives with other like-minded people. It doesn't have to be something that is, meets regularly. It could be something that, there's a collective of people across different parts of the world that, you might meet online. You might share the same ideas of creativity or a value base or a particular interest in certain types of creative practice. But that's definitely something I would encourage people to do. Having done it myself now, when I'm feeling kind of demotivated or a little bit lost in my practice, the collective kind of holds me up. And we've all agreed this, that we do hold each other up when we need to. And it's wonderful. So we do collective work together. We have a wonderful exhibition that toured called Unapologetically Other, where we created different pieces of work that celebrate our mixedness and our otherness. And we talk to people about what it means to be of mixed heritages, whatever that may be. Doesn't mean it's not just as binary as being half black, half white. None of that. It's not about that. It's about, us as human beings having real depth to our heritage and our ethnicity and our backgrounds, and really kind of celebrating that.
That sounds so positive and dynamic, in all honesty. Sounds like there's a lot of energy in that group. My last question is, and hopefully it's not too difficult one, what's next? Where do you think you might be going? Or do you know where you're going?
Well, that's a great question. Where am I going next? So what's next for me? I'm often in my studio, which is my sanctuary, really, just experimenting with pieces and experimenting with techniques. I'm always learning. I learn from my amazing colleagues that share studio spaces. I learn from going to look at gallery exhibitions and talk to other artists about how they're doing work, how they're producing work. I do lots and lots of research. I'm often in my studio researching. I've got a couple of current projects that are just beautiful that I'm finishing off at the moment. So I've just done a couple of really interesting creative research pieces with universities, 2 different universities, working with academics who are producing work on specific themes. So working with King's College at the moment, who've done a really interesting, disturbing but interesting study around sexual harassment and the student experience. And I've been working with them on a kind of visual and embodied methodology where I've been embedded with their discussions, listening to the discussions with the policymakers and change makers and students. And I'm creating a piece of work based on their work, on their words and their thinking. And I also, as part of that project, worked alongside a poet who has now produced a piece of poetry and prose about that experience as well. So that's taken me into a really interesting world of listening, picking up key words, key phrases, and taking those and representing those in a creative way and representing those back to those groups of people as a way of affirming their thoughts and their feelings on a particular subject. So that's been really, really lovely and interesting. So bringing those pieces of work together at the moment. I think I'll just continue to get bigger and bigger. That sounds so egotistical. Don't mean that. I mean in size, in creating work. The Grenfell Tower piece, 12 foot square, which doesn't sound very much, but I would encourage somebody to pace out 12 feet. It's enormous. That has opened up to me the possibilities of, you can just go as big as you possibly can. And I love that. And I'm going big, and I'm going as big as I can. And then when I've gone big, I'll go even bigger. So that's really opened up my practice, which is wonderful. So yeah, lots of experimenting, lots of seeing how big I can possibly go. certainly lots more working with strangers across the country and hopefully even across the world in relation to some of my collaborative and participatory pieces. And I suppose just really seeing where it takes me. Really, I recognise that I'm in a privileged position because I've got a space where I can think and work and test things out, and I'm surrounded by other creative people that keep me kind of going, really. So I am very lucky in that respect.
Wow. Yeah. It sounds like you have a lot on and, some really good ideas. So I'm going to continue following you on Instagram and social media because I'd love to see where you're going. I'd love to see some of your projects.
Oh, yes, please do. Please do. That'd be lovely.
Well, great. Thanks. It's been lovely speaking with you. It's been amazing speaking with you. And I really appreciate you being a guest on this podcast.
Thank you very much, Heather. It's been absolutely beautiful. And it's been wonderful being able to talk about my practice. And thank you very much for the great questions as well.
Thanks for some really insightful answers. Thanks for tuning in to my conversation with Jane. Jane's work reminds us that creativity is not just a solitary pursuit. It's a shared language of resilience and connection. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out Jane's website and social media presence. Links are in the show notes. If Artist Tales is finding a place in your creative life, spread the word. Share it with friends and fellow makers. In the next episode, I'll be speaking with Eilish Henderson, a textile artist, writer, and educator whose work blends fine art techniques with deeply personal storytelling. Eilish's stitch collages and mixed media pieces explore themes of emotional repair, memory, and identity. Her practice is as much about transformation as it is about creation, and I can't wait to share her story with you.